Disney's constant and unrelenting MCU output proves to be inspiration for another Ministry of Dice video. We're today going to be celebrating the character of Spider-Man in the game of Dice Masters, so stick around for 6 seconds and we'll take a look at some of my faves. Yes, hello, welcome folks. It's Chris here from the Ministry of Dice and I'm back again today with another video presentation for you all to enjoy. Thank you for sticking around, and as I mentioned in the intro there, I'm going to be celebrating the character of Spider-Man in Dice Masters. If you have been living under a rock for the last week or so, then you won't know this, but everyone else will know this because it's all the talk of Nerd Town. The latest Marvel Cinematic Universe release, Spider-Man No Way Home, has landed in cinemas around the world, well, in most regions. I believe there's some regions not got it yet, and yeah, everybody's talking about it. It's the big noise for comic book movie nerds, and so like always, I've drawn inspiration from the world around me and decided to make a video about some of my favorite or standout Spider-Man cards in the game of Dice Masters today. Now, to be specific, I am focusing on the 24 Spider-Man cards. I'm not going to be looking at all the kind of ancillary Spider-Men like Iron Spider, Scarlet Spider, Gwen Stacy, the Miguel O'Hara's, the Spider-Girls, the SP//DRs of the world. I'm just looking at the 24 Spider-Man cards specifically and just highlighting some of my faves or some of the ones that I played around with in the past and enjoyed. So let's get into it. And we're going right back to the beginning because Spider-Man's been in the game since day dot. And we're looking at Wallcrawler, Spider-Man Wallcrawler, a 4-cost fist, which reads, if Spider-Man attacks and is not blocked, you may pay 2 fists to change your opponent's life to 10 before damage is dealt. 033, 144, and 155 on the stat line. Now, fun fact, this card is actually errated. If you take a look on the WizKids errata page, I'll put a link in the description down below, it actually says now, change your opponent's life to 10 instead of dealing damage. Because there was some nasty competitive combos that people came up with this. It was certainly one of the driving forces behind things like the Sword of Revealing Light and the Relentless Bans for the globals that prevented characters from blocking. Because, let's just, call it out for what it is. A 4-cost fist that if you attacked with it early doors could halve your opponent's life. Just halve it. Do you know what I mean? And there were tools, like those globals I just mentioned, that allowed you to prevent Spider-Man from getting blocked and therefore driving that through. It was an absolute shocker. So people were really going for this kind of blitzkrieg shock and awe approach of getting a Spider-Man out super quick, attacking with him, just spamming globals or things like dimension doors to make him unblockable, get them down to half-life. Boom. In an instant, early game, really applying the pressure, and then following it up with other kind of rough and tumble, big, beefy, muscly dudes that could make use of the dimension door or the block prevention globals at the time. So yeah, really scary. And before he was errated, if you had him on level 3, he'd take your opponent's life down to 10 and then do a further 5 himself as an unblocked character, making them 75%. Behind the curve. So yeah, really scary one, this one. Lots of people were playing around with it, saw opportunity as a kind of competitive card. There's been erratas that took place that then made it a little bit less impactful, but certainly a significant card and one that we all had a lot of fun trying to figure out that sort of jigsaw puzzle of making him unblockable and getting your opponent on half-life super quick early doors. So yeah, one to take a look at if you've not done already. There was also a promo Spider-Man around the time of AVX, this one here, Spider-Man the Amazing. This was from the AVX 13 card set that came out in several Organised play kits. He's a 6-cost fist with the Avengers affiliation. When Spider-Man attacks, you may pay 3 fists to make your opponent lose half his life rounded down before damage is dealt. And then the same stat line using the AVX dice there, 033, 144, 155. So sort of conceptually in the same space, however, without the cap of 10. So no matter what life your opponent was on, this Spider-Man, when he attacks, doesn't need to be unblockable. You can pay 3 fists and bring your opponent's life down by half before damage is dealt. So lots of teams in the early days that were looking at the like the D&D fist swarmers like Kobold as a means of generating a lot of fists to then plow into this guy. Obviously cards like PXG Global, which was used for heavy ramp, was allowing you to get to that 6 purchase cost nice at early doors. And again, there was a few kind of shock and awe competitive teams that came out the woodwork back in the day trying to make something happen with this guy. And also, you've got to dwell on it. Look at that. Outstanding artwork. Really amazing. That's a significant moment in the AVX storyline there. I'll keep it spoiler free, but if you want to know more, you can check out my Organised play kit retrospective, which I'll drop a link to in the description down below as well, which talks through kind of the thematic relevance of that card to the storyline as well. So yeah, a couple of early doors Spider-Man. So right out the gate, I mean, rightly so. He is one of Marvel's most popular and most significant characters. You know, it's often been talked about Spider-Man over the years that his kind of everyman teenage troubles separated him from the superhero crowd. Certainly back in the day, in the early days, that kind of bedded his popularity into comic book readers in the 50s and 60s. So yeah, rightly so. So there you go. There's the AVX ones. What's next? This UXM. Now, this is one, I got to admit, it's not actually that great, but I just remember using it a lot in Uncanny X-Men drafts. So it's Spider-Man Hero for Hire, 5-cost fist, and he reads, when Spider-Man attacks, choose one opposing character, that character cannot block. And then the same stat line again, 033, 144, and 155. So yeah, not super awesome. I mean, we've certainly had stuff subsequent to this character coming out in Uncanny X-Men that does similar things or achieves the same aim for a lower cost, but not quite with the stat value sometimes. But I do remember making good use of this guy in Uncanny X-Men drafts. It was just handy as just a little kind of, you know, when you're trying to get your way through a wall and you need something that your opponent's got out the way. He was just a method of doing it, and it was worth footing the bill of 5 to give you an edge in that kind of draft scenario. And he's not insignificant in terms of his stat line. So Spider-Man brings a bit of muscle, bit of beef to your team. So yeah, not a fantastic card by any stretch of the imagination, but just one I have fond memories of because I used him in some Uncanny X-Men drafts back in the day. Next up, we've got Amazing Spider-Man, and this is significant because obviously it's a set that is centered all around Spider-Man and introduced the Spider-Friends affiliation. And I definitely love this card. I've used it many, many times because he's been a kind of cornerstone of some Spider-Friends teams that I've built over the years because I love making themey single affiliation teams. So Tangled Web is a 4-cost bolt that reads, when Spider-Man attacks, he gets +2 attack until the end of turn. If he's on his burst phase, which is his level 1, instead, all of your Spider Friends get +2 attack while attacking. And then he has a global there, pay a bolt, target character die gains the Spider Friends affiliation this turn. So, and his stat line changed a little bit here. You'll notice he's now 133, 143, 254. So a little bit heavier on the fielding cost at the top end there. Heavier on the fielding cost overall because you have to pay 1 at level 1. And he's been just a little bit weakened in terms of his defensive stats. However, brings a lot of value if you're playing a themey team. He was certainly one you could build a draft team around, where as the stacks were going about, you just accrued whatever Spider-Friends characters you could get along with this guy. Also, lots of strategies using Mary Jane, MJ, for example. Or another to give him Overcrush. There was also lots of shenanigans about bringing him in on level 1 using things like Polymorph so that you could swap him out for a sidekick, bring him in at level 1 and guarantee you had him on the burst phase. Tons of stuff. I suppose what I'm saying is lots of like play around little archetypes you could do there. But just get yourself an army of Spider Friends either in a themey format or in a draft. Grab hold of this guy as the cornerstone who's just going to really buff up those stats and make your Spider Friends all the more threatening. And they're not insignificant in terms of attack value, some of the Spider-Friends characters for sure. So having him in your team, just giving them that little extra punch, that little bit of extra edge is a fun card, but also significant, as I say, because it brought in, he was a kind of cornerstone of that Spider-Friends team. It's Spider-Man. He's obviously going to be a big part of the Spider-Friends team. So yeah, really enjoyed this one, and I still play with him today, still used him on teams today with stuff like Madam Web, for example, who you can pay to and make your characters unblockable with. So Spider-Man Tangled Web, there we go. Next on the list, I think I'm going to Civil War now. I am well remembered, and I think these Civil War cards have been a bit overlooked over the years now, because there's been, subsequently other characters that sort of do the same thing. But at the time, I'll reiterate, I have fond memories of using them a great deal at the time of release, in drafts, in theme teams, or to strengthen up teams that I was just sort of playing around with casually. This one here, for example, Unmasked, is a 4-cost bolt with the Spider-Friends affiliation. While Spider-Man is active, prevent all damage to you from opposing when fielded abilities, which can be very handy in a meta where you've got, I don't know, what was around at the time, Civil War when fielded. I've not pre-prepared my research on that one. My memory's a little bit blurry, but I know there was some when fielded stuff. I know just once, one example, which is not a great example, but one time I remember having this on my team in a Spider-Friends list, and I was playing against a villains list, and I stopped my opponent from doing a load of damage with the Justice League Deathstroke the Terminator, that does damage for each villain in the field when he's fielded. There you go. But yeah, handy. But there was also this one here, Spider-Man Photo Op, 5-cost bolt. While Spider-Man is active, opposing when fielded abilities cannot be used unless your opponent pays 1 life. Or if he's on his burst phase, they cannot be used unless your opponent pays 2 life. Now that's actually really quite good. For a 5-cost, he's a bit painful on the fielding costs, but again, I've dropped him on a few teams just sort of randomly as a bit of like, oh, I've got a slot free, this Spider-Man looks quite good, he fits the theme, or, I don't know, he's good because he's a Bolt character, for example, and I've got a lot of Bolty stuff going on, or whatever, there's been reasons for selecting him, and found him to be quite oppressive, like, placing my opponent in some really tough choices around whether they should remove my character with a Hawkeye or a Rocket Raccoon, or whether they should be doing 2 or 3 damage with a Nobby or a Gobby, when they're going to end up losing life. And the fact that it's lose life as well, which makes it all the harder for the opponent to prevent, because you can't stop lose life. I don't think there's anything that stops lose life. Largely overlooked, I think, this one, but I've definitely used him a few times and got, again, some fond memories of him, which is why he makes my list today. So there's the Civil War ones. I'm going to move forward a little bit now to the Spider-Man Maximum Carnage set, which again, of course, was going to have a Spider-Man character in it. It's the Spider-Man Maximum Carnage set, and it's it's a team pack that's hard to get your hands on nowadays, actually. So if you're new to the game and you're kind of rooting back and trying to build a collection from some of the classic archive Dice Masters releases, Spider-Man Maximum Carnage, great set with great cards, and therefore really hard to get hold of. And he is one of the contributing reasons why. Spider-Man War of the Heart, 4-cost fist with the Spider-Friends affiliation. More than 5 lines of text, this one, so tune in. While Spider-Man is attacking, your opponent must declare at least 1 blocker for each of your attacking psychic character dice before assigning blockers to your non-psychic character dice. When Spider-Man attacks, prevent all damage dealt to your psychic character dice until the end of the turn. And back to the classic stat line, 033, 144, and 155. Now, loads of people were playing around with this card. Loads of people. They were pairing it up with the Professor X from X-Men First Class that gets psychic characters out, or pairing it up with things like Star Labs, or Captain America that was in set with this guy that had globals that got your sidekicks out in the field, building up a bit of a wall of sidekicks, obviously looking to maybe naturally roll a couple as well, and then attacking with Spider-Man and then maybe something else with a few sidekicks and forcing your opponent in a position where they had to block those sidekicks before they could block anything else, and therefore going through for some good solid damage. Bit of the old Thicket Basilisk. There's one for the Magic players, the old Thicket Basilisk lore combo approach. And then what people were doing were they were buffing up those sidekicks, so using characters like Agent Coulson, for example. That's one that immediately springs to mind. Or there's a Batman out there, although he was a bit later on. They would give those sidekicks a stat bump to make them, so not only were they being forced to block the sidekicks and leaving the nasty stuff to go through to do damage, but they were also losing characters because the sidekicks were really hardcore. And the sidekick stayed in the field because this Spider-Man prevented all damage dealt to sidekick character dice. So you were sitting nice and pretty, knowing you had a few blockers ready to go for your opponent's turn as well. Really strong card. It was played around with loads. Lots of people used it to make to kind of form the kind of central combo, central maneuver within their team, and just a really interesting kind of way of doing it. Although it did rely on having a lot of stuff going on in your team, which I think is why it didn't quite go to the heady heights of the top tier. But still a super fun card. I've definitely played around with teams with allies, for example, using allies, forcing my opponent to block my allies and things. Spider-Man, War of the Heart, and Wong. Great little combo, that. One to think about. But yeah, really enjoyed playing around with that one. Not much more to say there. I'm sure you can see the value of that. So there's Spider-Man War of the Heart. Right, what's next on my list? All right, I'm moving into the most recent set here, Infinity Gauntlet. Now, Infinity Gauntlet is particularly interesting because I could argue that all of the Spider-Man, all 4 rarities of the Spider-Man Infinity Gauntlet are eye-catching Spider-Man worth celebrating. The first, although I've only gone for 3 of them in the video, the first one that I've gone for here is this 5-cost fist at the uncommon rarity, the Spider-Man Responsibility. He's got Overcrush, and Spider-Man costs 1 less to purchase for each of your unique active character dice, with the classic stat line of 033, 144, 155. So he's a 5-cost out the gate, but it doesn't take very long to make him a 4 or a 3 cost even. And an Overcrusher with a stat line that's 3, that's got an attack on its stats of 3, 4, 5 is not to be overlooked. It really isn't to be overlooked. Certainly a strong one to use in the draft context because he is a 1-card win condition out the gate. You know what I mean? He does all the work in the game text of the card itself, which is eye-catching. But in constructed play, that's also a reason why to pay it some attention as well. And we're not short of ways of buffing his stat line either. We're not short of globals out there. There's tons of Bolt and Fist globals and +1 attack. You've got your Ric Flair from the WWE where you can pay 4 and give him +4. There's a multitude of options to really maximise the opportunity with that Overcrush. And there's force block globals out there in the current meta as well to pair him up with. So he doesn't see a lot of play, and there's a reason for that, the rare, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think he should see more play because it's a really good card. Definitely one that I've tried to build a team or 2 out of. Next up is the super rare, which caught a lot of attention when he was first spoiled a while ago. Spider-Man Superior Team Up, a 3-cost fist that reads, Spider-Man's card is considered to have the affiliations of all the character cards on your team. And then, of course, the classic stat line there. So lots of people saw opportunity with this guy, particularly with the kind of affiliation-focused basic actions. Team Up specifically, because you get a stat bump +1/+1 for every different affiliation active affiliation. So all you would need to do is load your team up with 7 different affiliations, put this Spider-Man on the team, get this Spider-Man out, and with a team up, he's instantly getting a huge stat bump. It was you had to subtract 1 from it. So in theory, with a team up, he was getting +6/+6 right out the gate. So him and one other character would just be a really scary combo. And he's a 3-cost, you know what I mean? And he's not insignificant with his stats as well. It's just that Team Up and Spider-Man are not both in the modern meta at the same time right now. Interesting one. But he was eye-catching for that reason. And I know that some people have built golden teams and global escalation teams, really trying to abuse his game text and his low cost. And I think they've done pretty well. So a very eye-catching one. But of course, when talking about Infinity Gauntlet, the real talk of the town was this guy here, Spider-Man Public Menace. 4-cost fist. When Spider-Man attacks, spin target character die to an energy face of your choice. So this spin down removal mechanic that Infinity Gauntlet introduced, here is another example of that in action, but this one is significant because whereas a lot of the others are triggered by, for example, when fielded, this one is triggered when he attacks, which is much harder in the modern meta to deal with. There's different ways and means of preventing or getting in the way of when fielded, or because it's happening in the main step, you've got a little bit of opportunity to do some stuff to recover from it somehow, like use some globals, for example. example. But this one, because he initiates it at the point of attack, can be absolutely devastating. And because it's an attack initiating as well, is per die, so you get 2 Spider-Man Public Menaces in the field. Attack with 2 of them, you're spinning 2 of your opponent's characters down to energy faces. So he has been seen in competitive teams at the highest level. He's been seen in casual teams as just a great piece of spot removal. He would certainly be one we've heard that you would pick up in a draft. Hashtag Spider-Man Forever. And so, this was the big noise and probably one of the most celebrated Spider-Man cards to date, because he's just a one-size-fits-all piece of removal. It doesn't matter what strategy you're really running, having a Spider-Man that spins opponents' characters down to energy and removes them as an attack trigger is just attractive for many, many teams. So Spider-Man Public Menace, the rare from Infinity Gauntlet, you will see on teams all over the place, and is definitely one that we'll see hanging around in the modern meta for quite some time yet. So there we go, Spider-Man Public Menace. And then last on the list, just a little curiosity, this one really, but there was an Organised play kit released last year called the Infinity Gauntlet Play at Home kit. It was sold direct to consumers, so it wasn't through local gaming stores because of the situation in 2021. And this was the kind of central character of that Play at Home kit, Spider-Man Wallcrawler of Forest Hills, 4-cost fist with the Spider Friends affiliation. The first Spider-Man die you purchase each game costs 1 less, so you can get it for 3 for the first one. And he's got Recruit sidekick. So Recruit, when the character damages your opponent, you can then move the relevant character die from your use pile, reserve pool, or prep area into the field on level 1. So in this instance, you would grab a sidekick out your use pile, or out your most likely in most instances you grab one out your use pile. So really fun, really curious. There's lots of little intriguing elements, like his max die 6, for example. But just a fun, janky bit of something to play around with, because what Recruit does is it gives you a little bit of wilder abandon when it comes to attacking with your characters, knowing that if your opponent blocks them, then it gets KO'd and you can roll it in next turn. If they leave it unblocked and let it go through, that's fine. They'll take the damage, and you're grabbing a blocker to keep you a little bit safer in the following turn. So, yeah, really, really interesting Recruit. There was lots of Recruit stuff planned for the Spider-Man campaign box that never happened, sadly. But I think this is an example of them repurposing cards from that Spider-Man campaign box and putting it out to market. And we're going to see some of the game text from that campaign box on other cards in the future. I'll bet good money. So, yeah, not a competitive one, but I built a couple of teams around him and played him against my man Andy, my partner in crime. And there was a bit of fun to be had. Definitely one of the more interesting ways of generating sidekicks if you're making a sidekick-centric team. And again, for a 4-cost fist, that's a pretty decent stat line. So there we go, and that brings us right up to the present day. I think the next Spider-Man we'll see will most likely be in either the Fantastic Four vs. Galactus campaign box, or even more likely in the Secret Wars set. Currently slated for the summer, but we'll see. But yeah, there we are. There's my celebration of Spider-Man in Dice Masters. So please do let me know in the comments down below. Is there a Spider-Man that I've not spoken about today that you love or have some interesting combo ideas with? Just tell all down in the comments below. While you're down there, you know what to do with all the buttons. Press the red one, give the thumbs up one, all that YouTube-y stuff. And before you leave, well, don't leave yet. Stick around, because YouTube is going to tell you in a minute, in my fancy little box, a video that it thinks you will enjoy, because it's sciencey, algorithmic, computery things know that it's one that would appeal to you. So why not give that a try as well? All right, folks. Well, I've been Chris, and I'll see you on BritRoller6.com, on the Ministry of Dice podcast, or around here on our YouTube channel sometime soon. Thanks for watching.